We are going to finish up our last story about King David. We're going to skip way through the end of 1 Solomon and skip into 2 Solomon chapter 11. At this point, David has defeated Saul, and Saul's no longer chasing him through the valleys and the hills, and he has been king for quite a while. And we learned that King David's biggest downfall is women. He is very similar to a lot of leaders in our country, I think like Jonathan Edwards and Bill Clinton, who have everything that society says that a man should ever want, but they just lust and thirst for more. But the difference between a lot of modern leaders that I notice and King David is that King David repents and is very contrite over his sin and his transgressions. And it's because of that that Yahweh continues to honor him and not take away his position as ruler. So let's see how this story plays out. I'm going to start in 2 Samuel chapter 11. David and Bathsheba. In the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with his king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. So I want to mention something just about that first verse. You know, our driving question all year is, what can we learn from these characters? Well, I think that idleness, especially for adults, is very dangerous. You know, we are designed to be productive and to be, you know, fulfilling our destinies and to be working and doing things for society. And I see a lot of people that just fall into this pit of laziness where they don't work and they stay home all the time, and they become very easily ensnared by pornography and other sins and addiction. And this is exactly what happens to King David. So notice that he was at home when he should have been out working with all of his soldiers. And earlier in his story, in the other videos that I've read with you, he's always fighting with his soldiers. But later in life, it's like he kind of gets lazy and comfortable, and a place of comfort can be a really dangerous place in reality. And it's in that comfort that he starts to make excuses of why he doesn't have to go to the front line, and that is when he falls into this trap of sin. Moving on to verse 2. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful, and David sent someone to find out about her. The man said, "Isn't this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" Then David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. She had purified herself from her uncleanness. Then she went back home. The woman conceived and sent word to David, saying, "I am pregnant." So King David was the first to have like baby daddy issues. So David does not handle this with any kind of integrity at all. Verse 6. So David sent this word to Joab, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." And Joab sent him to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked him how Joab was, how the soldiers were, and how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." So Uriah left the palace, and a gift from the king was sent after him. But Uriah slept at the entrance to the palace and with all of his master's servants and did not go down to the house. When David was told Uriah did not go home, he asked him, "Haven't you just come from a great distance? Why didn't you go home?" Uriah said to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my master Joab and my lord's men are camped in open fields. How could I go home to my house and eat and drink and lie with my wife? As surely as you live, I would not do such a thing." Then David said to him, "Stay here one more day, and tomorrow I'll send you back." Now, notice that David was really hoping that Uriah would go back and sleep with his wife so that he could play it off that this was Uriah's baby. They didn't have any medical DNA testing or technology or, Jerry Springer, who's the daddy test to take. So Uriah's integrity actually thwarted King David's plan. So now he's got to keep being devious to cover his sin up. And that's one thing that we can learn from this section of the story is a lot of times when we do commit a transgression, we end up having to lie and commit many more transgressions to hide our sin, when if we would really just come out with it, it's going to create a smaller mess. Continuing in verse 12. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and next. At David's invitation, he ate and drank with him, and David made him drunk. But in the evening, Uriah went out to sleep on his mat among the master's servants. He did not go home. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it with Uriah. In it he wrote, "Put Uriah in the front line where the fighting is fiercest. Then withdraw from him so that he will be struck down and die." So now this is the third time that David has plotted against Uriah. You know, I will never say that drinking is a sin. It is not. But there's so many characters in the Old Testament alone. Remember Lot, when his daughters got him drunk and his daughters were able to take advantage of him? Here, David got Uriah drunk, but even in his drunkenness, Uriah's integrity still stood strong. So maybe drinking isn't necessarily a sin, but I think I've mentioned in class before, I've never yet met a single person ever to say that alcohol has made my life better. But I've met a lot of people who have said that alcohol has ruined my life, ruined my reputation, ruined my family, ruined my marriage. So that's one big takeaway that we can take from this. Drinking makes you vulnerable, plain as day. Like, that's true throughout the Bible, throughout other examples in literature. I think of Polyphemus in the Odyssey. Odysseus got him drunk and was able to take advantage of him. So just remember that as you age, and especially as you go to college. Verse 14. David sends Uriah to the very front lines so that he will perish in war. Now verse 16. So while Joab had the city under siege, he put Uriah at a place where he knew the strongest defenders were. When the men of the city came out and fought against Joab, some of the men in David's army fell. Moreover, Uriah the Hittite died. Joab sent David a full account of the battle. He instructed the messenger, "When you have finished giving the king the account of the battle, the king's answer may flare up and he may ask you, 'Why did you get so close to the city to fight? Didn't you know they would shoot arrows over the wall? Who killed Abimelech, son of Jerubbaal? Didn't a woman throw an upper millstone on him from the wall so that he died in Thebez? Why did you get so close to the wall? If he asks you this, then say to him, also, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead.'" The messenger set out, and when he arrived, he told David everything Joab had sent him to say. The messenger said to David, "The men overpowered us and came upon us, against us in the open, but we drove them back to the entrance of the city gate. Then the archers shot arrows at your servants from the wall, and some of the king's men died. Moreover, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead." David told the messenger, "Say this to Joab. Don't let this upset you. The sword devours one as well as another. Press the attack against the city and destroy it. Say this to encourage Joab." When Uriah's wife heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. After the time of mourning was over, David had brought her to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But this thing that David had done displeased the Lord. Now, I'm just going to paraphrase what the prophet Nathan says to David in the next chapter. Nathan kind of comes to David in a parable and rebukes him. You know, what would you do to a man who had everything but took wealth from one who had very little? And David burns with rage, well, that man, should be killed. How could a man do such a thing? And Nathan very powerfully says, that man is you. You took someone else's wife as your own. When you're the king and you had your own wife, remember Michal, Saul's daughter, is married to David. So he already had other wives, and now he takes Bathsheba. And the prophet Nathan in the next chapter is very vocal about how wrong this was. But after hearing the prophet talk to him, he immediately confesses his sin. And actually, after this story, we're going to transition into the Psalms. And you're going to see a lot of the poems that David wrote as he grieves over this transgression. He becomes filled with remorse and sorrow over what he has done, which is quite different from a lot of politicians and leaders that I see in the modern day. And I believe that response to his mistake and that true contrition is what allows David to continue to lead and to continue to be blessed in God's kingdom. I hope you are staying safe and well, and continue to send me any messages or questions that you may have.